everyone. What is whole health? How does body, mind, and spirit play a part in what I believe is the next role for healthcare in the 21st century? We're going to be talking about that and much, much more this afternoon. In today's Reawaken You, always trust your guidance, especially we're going to be talking about health today, but your body knows what it needs, and it's giving you signals all the time. It's whether or not you're paying attention to it and open to it. So if you have time this week, sit quietly with yourself and check in with your body and see what you need to do to have it operating at optimum health. Okay, so today we are going to be talking to Mark Mincolla, the author of Whole Health. I'm very excited because this is, when I reviewed it on Amazon, it truly is where I hope that we are going for healthcare in the 21st century. And as I've said to people, whether you call it Obamacare or your term for it, my hope is all this hubbub about healthcare is going to push us into a holistic healthcare system because that's what we need. Welcome, Mark.
Julie, it's great to be here. Thanks so much.
If you could sum up whole health, please go ahead and do that. I'm sorry that you're not seeing this feed live because I have about 80 or 90 pages turned down here because there's such good information in the book. But if you were to sum it up in a paragraph, what would you say?
Well, first of all, it's about the ongoing self-management of one's own body, mind, and spirit, which are all sort of interdependent for the purposes of disease prevention and attaining to a higher level of life and prosperity. I think there are ways to do that. And again, the work that I've been doing for the past 32 years, 60,000 appointments, has been able to kind of time test and articulate both Eastern and Western techniques that are nutritional in some cases and bioenergetic in other cases that put together this system. It says, you know what, we've been able to help a lot of folks. Let's now teach them to do it because we're not going to do it for another 32 years like we just did.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that I love, my husband gets to read your book next, but you will be able to speak to him and he'll read it because at the beginning you talk about how everything is energy and you cite lots of wonderful studies. And I'm fairly enjoy research and passionate about this subject, but I learned a lot from reading your book. What, out of all the research, is there just something that you could share that you felt was most maybe important or that maybe would grab someone's attention about everything being related to energy of all the studies that you cited?
Yeah, probably two different things, maybe a couple different things. But the idea that, first of all, in 1921, we awarded Einstein the Nobel Prize. I remember being as a young boy growing up in upstate New York, everybody said, who's the smartest guy in the world? You know, I mean, it's a knee-jerk response to say Einstein because he is absolutely just such a brilliant, brilliant thinker. And to this day, you know, the world respects and kind of identifies with him as one of the greater, more brilliant minds of our time and maybe any time. So we awarded him a Nobel Prize for teaching us that energy and matter are interconvertible and transferable. He went on to say that energy creates matter. So the idea that Einstein says, look, when I'm looking at a chair, I'm not just looking at a material thing. I'm looking at a group of atoms. Or when I'm looking at your body, your physical form, your hair, your eyes, your teeth and gums, and your arms and legs, we're not just looking at a physical body. We're looking at a collection of energy particles that sort of group together like ice cubes. Again, it's almost like you're looking at water. You're not just looking at ice cubes. It takes atoms to create us. There's a fluidity to what we are. We just can't see it. Our five senses don't get it covered. And back in 1963, the human electromagnetic field, the fact that we are energetic creatures, with energetic properties, was proven by Max Planck researcher Dr. Rutger Weaver, who found that the human body produces 0.025 volts of electricity per centimeter at 10 hertz. He furthermore said that each charge is unique and different, so that we produce an ever-changing energy signature. So we've got the science, we've got the physics, if you will, that has proven the fact. I mean, let's face it. We go to the hospital or the doctors, we are exposed to things like we're exposed to different things like electromagnetics from the perspective of scanning. We do electromagnetic scans with CAT scans, PET scans, MRIs. So, I mean, that's a normal part of the nomenclature of medicine as well. So we tend not to talk about it or think about it, but no question about the fact we are both comprised of energy that we can't see and particles that come together that form these solid material bodies that we can see. So because we have a disadvantage with regard to the limitations of our five senses, we kind of leave it out of the mix, but it's there. We are definitely comprised of energy. And again, our wishes, our hopes, our dreams, our thoughts, our mind properties, our emotional properties are all indicative of our finer energies. But here's the real key. I think that if we don't take our energy into consideration when we're talking about healing, we're not going to get very far. Because it's all interdependent. It creates one force of human existence.
I absolutely agree. And, I believe Dr. Oz was probably the first person in what I would call popular culture to say publicly, that he felt that energy medicine was the next frontier that we would be tackling. But, not everyone's ready to hear that. And, it's my hope that your book becomes more widespread and that people have that aha moment to connect everything. One thing, again, I have thousands of pages turned down here because it was so many aha moments, but you're the first person I've read that said you believe we have our own personal energy codes that make us who we are, and that you refer to that as our constitution. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I will do that. Just before I do that, I'm going to remind you that on the 30th of January, I was actually on Dr. Oz, and I was actually muscle testing Dr. Oz and some of the people that were on the program. And at the end of our segment, we actually had the entire audience interfacing with each other and going through energy muscle testing. So it was really quite spectacular. So you're right. He has opened up the doors. He introduced me as an energy pioneer. He's very receptive. He doesn't quite know what to think of it, but he's clearly on board, and he's been good to expose and to bring the experience to the American public. So there's that. Number two. Yeah, we are. When we talk about energy, Julie, it's really a matter of appreciating the fact that we don't just have a DNA uniqueness. We talk about the uniqueness of our genetic code and our chromosomal formations. You think in terms of you can only change our genetic code 0.1% every 250 generations, but you can change the energetic expression. You can change the behavior of a gene in 0.7 of a second with thoughts, with energy. Foods even will change your gene expression. So I always say, look, energy plays its role in every aspect of life, in the entire hierarchy, not just the cellular hierarchy, but the genetic hierarchy as well. And the beautiful part about it is there's a unique DNA to every energy signature, like we talked about a little while ago. Dr. Rutger Weaver from the Max Planck Institute said, wow, not only do we produce a 0.025 volts per centimeter at 10 hertz electromagnetic field, they're all different, they're all unique. The energetic properties from one field to the next are representative of an energy signature. So it's kind of like part of our atomic or our molecular DNA signature, if you will. So we are truly unique, which is a beautiful thought when you think about it. Yeah, we're all sort of unified, by the same properties. So it's kind of interesting that there's a dichotomy that we're unique yet unified. But the fact that I think the ancient Chinese, the Ayurvedics, our ancestors, spent a lot of time really tapping into the uniqueness of everybody's special properties, because they felt that it was a distinct advantage. If you study Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine or any ancient medicine, the very first thing that they do is set up these properties of uniqueness, these constitutional uniquenesses that say, look, if I'm going to help Julie get better and feel healthier and stronger and become more of a vibrant human being, I better really spend some time trying to figure out what her uniquenesses are all about. I'm going to go to this patient named Julie, and I want to see if I can't appreciate her special properties and her needs, things that work for her that don't work for her. I mean, some people basically do well when they eat blueberries. Other people get a stomach ache. So we've got to tap into the uniqueness before we can really have any kind of success. We've got to go to the patient and try to understand all the far-reaching properties that make her exceptional and unique, so we can actually design programs of nutrition and design programs of natural medicine, and et cetera, that make a big, big difference for her and for her alone. One size doesn't fit all in the world of energy. I think it's a matter of whoever is willing to extend themselves to a higher level of adaptation and truly trying to discover the uniqueness of that person is going to have the greater effect on that person. So I think it's a matter of tapping into the constitution, as we call it, and that's really about that uniqueness. And that's the roadmap that invites us into Julie's experience so we can better design a program to befit her.
Which I think you're absolutely right on, but I think we definitely live in a society that's get them in, get them out. How many people can you see in one day? And it's a one-size-fit-all approach for much of medicine, in my personal opinion.
You're right, but I want to say something about that, if I may. I think the idea that there's no question, you're right. There's a daunting task before medicine to say, look, we got a lot of people to take care of here. But I also believe that the missing component isn't the Surgeon General's efforts. It's not your doctor. It's not your hospital. It's not your local neighborhood clinic. The missing ingredient is the preventive response and the self-protecting response and the self-preventing response. The diet, the nutrition, the exercise, the going to bed early, the self-discipline, saying no to too many chocolate chip cookies, et cetera, et cetera. It's the individual's involvement. That's where we're missing the boat. You know, we would have a much more healthy country, a much more viable healthcare system if we took an active part in the process and really did our bit. So I think that it's really more a matter of putting the onus on the patient to do a little bit more preventive work. They can do it if we can educate them better. If we can inspire them more and really teach them. I mean, I've been working again. I've seen tens of thousands. I've seen 60,000 appointments over the past 32 years. One of the very first things that I notice when I work with people is they're looking to be educated. They're looking to be inspired. If you deliver, you're going to light them up, and if you light them up, you're going to get them to deliver, and you're going to help change their life. And that's what it's really all about. There's an old Chinese saying: you can feed a man a fish, or you can teach him how to fish and feed him for a lifetime. So we don't want to just feed a man a fish and just feed him for the day. We want to teach them how to fish, take care of themselves, and really get these people on board for a lifetime of good health. That's the key.
I can't. You're absolutely right. I think I couldn't have said it better, and that's true, because also I believe our system it's not about prevention. It's about stick a Band-Aid once it's happened. And so you're right. It needs to go back to the patient, the person, to become more in charge of their health. I wanted to ask you about muscle testing, because some people watching might not know what that is. And one thing, and we can talk about, that I absolutely love about your book is if someone doesn't have the resources to see someone, or they're in a rural area and someone like you is just not around, you give people enough tools that they have a starting point to change their health.
Absolutely, and it goes back to what we just said a second ago, Julie. I think if we really work hard, whoever we are, whatever we're doing in our specific vector of healthcare, if our focus is to make the patient a wiser patient, a more self-empowered patient, we did a great thing. I think, we can give people medicine, we can give them a massage, we can make them feel good for the moment. That's all well and good, but I think the real key is the lasting impression that you leave them with in terms of what they're going to be capable of doing long after you're out of the picture. And I think that the book is really my way of saying, look at folks, I'm going to put it to you real simply. For the past 32 years, I've discovered that I was able to help people in ways that I would have never dreamt 32 years ago. Never had in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that I could consistently help people recover from conditions, diseases, sicknesses, and illnesses like I have. And in some respects, I have no business being able to do it according to the world at large. But I'm doing it. I'm doing it routinely, and I've done it routinely. So, I'm going to basically put it all down in a book and try to organize it and sequence it and make it understandable and teach you, the reader, how to do it for yourself, because I can't do it for everybody all the time, and I'm not going to be able to do it forever. But the one thing I can leave you with is this incredible blueprint, this incredible set of protocols and disciplines that teach you in very simple terms how you can actually get well and stay well all the days of your life, and your families as well. So that's really what the book is about. It's really a classic self-help book that is designed to bring your brilliance out, if you will.
So, yes, absolutely. So could you explain to people what muscle testing is? Because that's besides the Chinese medicine, that's a big part of the book.
It is a big part of the book, and actually it gets into the diagnostic componentry of natural medicine. Again, reminding ourselves that we are energy-producing beings. That's our starting point. And that, as Max Planck researcher Dr. Rutger Weaver proved in 1963, we actually produce a specific electromagnetic field. So what does that mean? That means that we're producing electricity when we're alive, obviously, when you've gone to funeral parlors, when people that we've missed, loved ones that have crossed over, have become, unfortunately, taken out of this world. They're lying in a casket, and the body looks the same. In many cases, they look really handsome or attractive, and they're well cared for in their last moments. But unfortunately, there's just no vibrance, no electricity, no electromagnetic charge there. So the difference in your body's charge versus theirs is really what we're talking about. It's a life force. It's a generation of energy that we produce bioenergetically that keeps us alive. Now, to varying degrees, that energy determines wellness or lack thereof as well. So if people don't have a lot of energy, as they get older, they get kind of worn down and sort of exhausted by life, and as they age, they lose a lot of that life force. But that same electricity is still there until they leave. Now, obviously, the opposite is true as well. So the more vibrant you are, the better you take care of yourself, the more positive you're thinking, the more healthy your diet, the better your sleep habits, and the better you are managing stress, the higher your energetic field is going to be. So when we muscle test, we're saying we're really working with that electromagnetic field. We're working with the properties of your electricity. So if you go to a grocery store with a loved one, and the two of you go to the produce section, and you grab something like a tomato, you hold it to your heart, hold it right in front of your chest, raise up your left arm at parallel to the ground, at shoulder's height. Extend your arm while you're holding in your other hand the tomato to your heart. You ask your loved one to tug on your wrist. If your wrist gets really weak and your arm test fails and you just don't have the ability to sustain keeping your arm up and strong, that's an indication that the magnetic electricity of that particular food or the tomato is not in agreement. It doesn't jive. It doesn't work with your electromagnetic field. So it's a way to electromagnetically food test or allergy test yourself for foods. You go up and down the aisles at the produce section or whatever, any kind of aisle in the grocery store for that matter, hold any food you want to your heart with one hand. The other hand and wrist are extended out to be muscle tested for strength. Have your loved one tug on your wrist again. Those foods that are strongest are most electromagnetically positive for you. The ones that flunk and cause a weakened arm response are the ones that are electromagnetically negative or allergenic for you. That's one way to muscle test. There's a lot of different applications that the book talks about that actually help you learn how your organs kind of lay out, whether your organ systems like your kidneys, your liver, your gallbladder are strong or weak, whether your immune system is strong or weak. It reveals the areas of weakness that you need to strengthen, and it kind of leads you into exactly what the most strengthening foods and vitamins and minerals are for you. So you can start by just running our little food test in your kitchen at home or in the grocery store with a loved one.
My husband and I are starting a family, and so I'm a little older.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I'm a huge fan of alternative medicine, so I'm seeing an acupuncturist. But there's a guy here in Raleigh who actually I've interviewed who's a quantum neurologist, but he muscle tests all the time. And I'd love your comment on this. So one of the first things he did was ask my body, can I get pregnant? Do I want to get pregnant? Because he was like, we've got to test for that, because if not, there's no point. And I'm trying to be delicate about that, because if someone's listening, I know how much someone would want a child, but he was just reading my body's energy. And I just think that for me, it would, if he, and he's very straightforward, if he wasn't able to work with me, he would have said, you know what, this is what I'm getting. So if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that I always talk about in the book, and I talk about it quite often, that there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. J. Andrew Armour at the Heart Math Institute out in Boulder City, California, back in 1991. It's a remarkable study, and he evaluated and discovered the power of this bundle of afferent nerves right in front of the heart. Actually, it's in front of and just below. This little bundle of nerves is called the cardiac intrinsic ganglia. And he found that 65% of the energy that moves from the cardiac intrinsic ganglia actually transfers from the ganglia to the big brain. So they found that all this traffic, what they call thought traffic, neurological thought traffic, like when you think thoughts aren't just going from the big brain to the body. 65% of the traffic, actually, of the thought traffic, when you think, you're actually thinking and reasoning from your heart 65% of the time. So the process of knowing the answer to something, as we always say, you kind of know it in your heart. Well, you really do know it in your heart. So I say muscle testing is really about the electromagnetic indication that comes from your cardiac intrinsic ganglia, and that you have this beautiful, this bundle of afferent nerves that's now referred to as the little brain within the heart. So the little brain actually speaks to the big brain, and the big brain relays everything to the body. So we never really understood that before Dr. Armour's work. So I say that when we're muscle testing things like, do I really want to get pregnant, or am I happy today, or am I unhappy today, or whatever the case may be, you're going to have an answer. You're going to have a neurological charge that responds to the stimuli of that given question. Your mind and your body both produce a unified field of electromagnetics. So you're going to produce a very specific field response, positive or negative. That's just kind of how we work. People don't realize it, but when you think about going to the dentist, if you think about paying your taxes, nobody's getting knocked down thinking about those thoughts. But unbeknownst to you, your field is not particularly strong when you think about things like that. I often do what I call, and I've talked in the book about what's called tuning, or tuning up the patient. Tuning means you're trying to energetically get them in tune with the process of muscle testing. So if I have Julie raise up her arm and I say, all right, Julie, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to recall 9/11. So in your mind, you're going to basically flash back to 9/11 and the events, horrible events of that day. Your magnetic field is not going to be strong, Julie, obviously, for obvious reasons. There's a lot of neurology tied to the memory of that negative experience. Or if I said, I want you to think about the favorite, the most fun time you've ever had with the person you love the most, it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to strengthen your charge. So you think about the word love. In fact, we did this on Dr. Oz, and when I was on Dr. Oz back in January. We used words like cancer. The word cancer doesn't strengthen anybody's magnetic field. It weakens it. The words like happy, healthy, love, confidence, peace, those are words that are going to strengthen your field. So anytime our cardiac intrinsic ganglia, that reasoning, thinking part of our instincts within our heart, is contemplating any kind of concepts or stimuli, it's going to send out a charge that's either a plus or a minus charge. Your body, your electromagnetic response is going to be perceived and registered and recorded by your muscles because of the neuromuscular transiting of energy in your body. So the muscles are a perfect medium to kind of play with this little dowsing, this little kind of biofeedback response. It's fun stuff.
Wow, well, that makes me feel better because I had a lot riding on that, very emotional around that subject. One thing, if you can talk a little bit about, I love how you, in the book, food allergies and food testing, and you use that a great example in doing muscle testing. And why is that so important?
Well, for me, for starters, I've learned over the past 32 years and 60,000 appointments that food is medicine, folks. And I don't just mean that as a metaphor. I mean it literally. Food was designed by nature, by the divine, by whatever, by source consciousness. Food was designed to be our primary medicine. Lilly, Pfizer, and Merck were not in the original matrix of solutions. It's the idea that food produces all these remarkable things we're starting to discover nowadays called phytonutrients. Science is catching up with what nature already had in mind. The fact that we're studying things like, I talked to recently to Dr. Daniel Nixon and Dr. Gary Stoner. Daniel Nixon was from the University of South Carolina Medical School. He had a great research team for 8 years. Dr. Gary Stoner from the Ohio State University, great research team. They both had two different teams that studied the potential healing power and the anti-cancer properties of red raspberries. Mm-hmm. You know those little tiny seeds in the raspberries?
Yes,
and
I love raspberries.
That get stuck in your teeth. Any of those little raspberry seeds are filled with an antioxidant that's called ellagic acid. Ellagic acid has been found to be effective against 9 different forms of human cancer. 9 different human cancers. The equivalent of 3/4 of a cup of raspberries. This is what all these studies found at University of South Carolina Medical School and Ohio State University. They found that the equivalent of 3/4 of a cup of red raspberries is enough to cause cancer cell death, to kill cancer cells, and to cause what's called apoptosis, which is killing cancer cells, and G-arrest, which means the replication system of cancer gets broken down. Raspberries. So is food medicine? We now are beginning to learn things like that clearly have proven the fact and underscore the reality that food is truly medicine. Don't make any mistake about it. So for starters, you want to make sure that you've got the optimal food that works for you and you alone. Remember, one size does not fit all in the whole health program. So when I wrote Whole Health, I said one of the things I'm going to do here to replicate the success that I've had in my work is to make sure that people learn to articulate the importance of individualization. You can't just generically say blueberries and raspberries are good for everybody. They're not good for everybody. Foods produce an energy. Humans produce an energy. They've all got their own unique energy signature. It's a matter of mixing and matching and getting it right. So for some people, raspberries are really, really healthy and really strong and good for them. Other people, not so. Some people will be allergic to them. So if you take somebody who's allergic to raspberry, all that stuff we said about their anti-cancer properties gets canceled out. So you want to start with medicinal, high-quality, organic foods, really good, clean foods. That's our beginning point. Then we screen them with our muscle testing system to optimize and maximize the relationship with food and to make sure that you're getting the very most out of the options.
How often do you recommend doing muscle testing? And I ask this because my husband texted me a couple weeks ago and said, I want to be a vegetarian. And it was kind of out of the blue. We're not big meat eaters, but he's not exactly fans of vegetables. So I've been working on incorporating more vegetables and hiding them, if you will. But I just thought it was interesting. All of a sudden, he's like, I want to do this. And it just made me think, well, how often would you test for if you're allergic to a food or if it's not working with your system?
I have two answers to that. First of all, I'd say that once you get your program all mapped out and you understand what you got going on with regards to foods and diet and all that stuff, and again, the whole health program, the whole health book teaches the reader how to map out an entire personalized program, all customized. The foods that are most energetically appropriate for you get mapped out. The diet gets mapped out as to how many ounces of protein and carbohydrates and water, and it's all mapped out, which is beautiful. Okay, so once you've got that all mapped out, you got to go through changes because energy is always in the state of flux. That is not a solid, static state of testing that we're doing. It's very fluid. So I always tell people, once you get your program up and running, you should theoretically kind of dust it off and reboot it maybe every 2 weeks. So let your program go for 2 weeks and then just kind of check some things out, see if you need to rotate. So you want to make sure that you're updated every 2 to 3 weeks at the most. The other part of that answer is, to harken back to your story about your quantum neurologist that you worked with, he asked you a question about do you want to become pregnant? I mean that's a standard example of how we have so many different questions. Should I become a vegetarian? Is vegetarianism healthy for me? Like your husband's question. You know what? Those questions come up consistently. So those are what I refer to as day-to-day muscle testing examples. Those are examples of muscle testing that we should be doing ongoing, from day to day, moment to moment, hour to hour. So that keeps us abreast of the best bioenergetic options on a day-to-day basis for all those unanswered questions that we might have to come up.
Fantastic. Can you briefly, I'm going to try to hit on all the major points. Can you briefly discuss fixed constitution? We talked about our personal codes, but what do you mean by fixed constitution codes?
Well, a good example that I always tell people, look at, part of what we're all about is always fluid and moving and changing. But part of us is fixed. And we just talked about DNA. Theoretically, DNA at a material level is totally fixed. You're not going to change that. You're going to change your DNA 0.1% every 250 generations, which means it's pretty fixed in place. But the energy of your DNA can shift dramatically based on your thoughts, your wishes, hopes, dreams, your diets, etc. So part of this is fixed. Part of this really kind of is very fluid. I also say that your foods really break down into 3 different groups. I have what I call the red light, green light, yellow light system, which means after you've tested your foods 2 or 3 different times, you muscle test them, let's say 3 times in a row, back to back to back, over a period of 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks or so. You're going to find that some foods passed every time. Like every time you tested yourself for rice passed each of the 3 times. Then you get a green magic marker, and you put that green marker on that rice in your food chart, because it's a green light food. And there's a food like maybe wheat that flunked every time you tested it. Each time you tested 1, 2, 3 times in a row, your wheat flunked. Give it a red magic marker. That's a red light that's fixed, and that's a fixed allergen. Stay away. And there's what I call rotating foods. Like if you get the food that passed one time and failed another time, or went back and forth, that's yellow, that's caution. That means don't eat it every day. Eat it once a week and rotate it. So it just shows you examples of how energy can be very static, very fixed, in some cases, not static, but fixed in place and seemingly static or slower moving, not as rapidly changing as others. Then there's energy that just shifts and changes all the time.
What can you, other thing I want to touch on about the body part that I love, was the 6th sense energy diagnosis. and would love you to talk about that, because again, you're the first person, and I apologize to anyone if I'm missing someone, that I just read and just puts that in a way like how important that is and what a difference that makes.
Well, again, I'm writing another book right now. It's due in September, and it's actually talking a lot about that. It talks about what's called the EGS. We call it the Energy Guidance System. For starters, folks, you have one, all right? So when you think about things like, let's see, you look at your plants in the window, you look at your trees and shrubs and flowering plants in your backyard. Do you ever notice how they stretch and reach and bend to be in the sunlight?
Yes.
They know exactly where they need to go. All right. Do you ever notice how I was point out the fact that cats will eat spiders, but they know not to eat poisonous spiders? Or you talk about homing pigeons. Have they say that homing pigeons have these vectors in their brain that you could take. They did these experiments. They took homing pigeons to these areas where they'd never been before, and they still find their way home, even though they're in totally different different properties and different areas they'd never ever visited before. So everybody and everything on the planet, every living thing on the planet that's energy-based, and everything is energy-based, has these natural sort of homing properties, these natural innate energy guidance systems. So you take rough guesses and estimates all the time, or play hunches all the time. I always remind people that, when you're crossing a busy city street in the middle of the block, you're down in Manhattan or something like that, you're running across the street, hey, those cabs are going pretty quick, you better guess right, But you have this instinct as to when it's safe and when it's not safe. So you're always playing hunches. You're always kind of guiding yourself through life. That nobody has to deliver a textbook to tell you when is the right time to cross that street. So you have these two different forms of wisdom or intelligence or information. There's deductive, which is logical. You learn it in school. You study it, and you really grasp it from repetition, etc. Then there's inductive logic, which means it's innate. You have it within your own instincts. You just kind of know when something's going to happen. I just maintain that we don't use it. We've lost it because anything. The old saying goes, you don't use it, you lose it. I just believe that as a culture, we've become so hell bent on not using our innate intelligence, our inductive, intuitive intelligence. We automatically assume that it's crazy business. It doesn't really exist. Whatever has a left has a right. You got a left hand, you got a right hand. It's like what has a yin has a yang. We have inductive, we have deductive logic. So we do have inductive logic. It's a very real thing. It's been studied. NASA uses it, as I point out in the book. I talk about the Navy experiments and the Army experiments, the U.S. Army, the Navy, all the military, the government has been using it for years. There are people who are employed that work in the government. They talk about stories of John F. Kennedy knowing that he was going to be shot before he was shot. All kinds of remarkable stories and everything. We have this. This is part of our natural reality. But because, as a culture, we've chosen to organize ourselves culturally in a biological way and in a deductive fashion, we sort of feel like we strike everything from our consciousness beyond the deductive logic. Big mistake. We basically managed to leave out a really important part of our ability to miraculously kind of guide ourselves through life. So that to me is what sixth sensory diagnostics are all about. You have the ability to kind of tune in, to understand your levels of strength and weakness, to understand your levels of health, to kind of get better at determining them. And that's kind of tying into muscle testing a little bit as well, because I said the best muscle testing, when you get really good at it, is the muscle testing that you don't even have to do anymore because you're so tuned in. So to me, it's an exercise in getting more attuned to our innate wisdom and our ability to focus on our energy guidance system and to come back and to play with that and to get better at it.
My father had a freak accident where he cut off the blood supply to his hip. And so it ended up killing his hip and then took the other hip. And in this process, he was like, there's something wrong. Doctor one couldn't do it. Went to another hospital. And finally the third hospital. But, he kept being persistent, saying, there's something off here. There's something wrong. And it took him 3 tries. But, I think that he knew something was wrong. And so many times we discount that. But, we have our own, as you said, our sixth sense, our own innate ability. And so many times we just ignore that when that's, talk about your body saying, hey, I need help. And but I think sometimes that's a challenge for people when the quote-unquote experts are saying there's nothing wrong with you. And there just might be.
Well, not only that, I think in many cases, we feel like we're afraid to be right. and we may even feel we don't deserve to be that good. I think people have been talked out of their own innate wisdom, by, quote, expert mentality and machinery for so many years. But I got news for you. I mean, again, after 60,000 appointments, and I still grind them out day in and day out, the number of patients that I continue to see over and over and over and over by the tens of thousands who had patients who knew something more than the doctors knew is astounding. It happens every single day, 2-3 times every single day. The patient says, I knew that this was going on or that was going on. My doctor didn't pick up on it, and I was right. Repeatedly, I get that over and over and over. So you're absolutely right. People need to not be talked out of it, and even if the greatest expert in the world is trying to convince you otherwise.
I'd love for you to tell the story. I'm looking through my notes and can't find her name, but there was a woman who came to see you. Her grandchildren and children wanted her to see you, and she was, like, I'm okay with dying, but please share my story to help others.
Oh, yes.
And if you would share that, I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah, that was about 25, 30 years ago. It was quite a long time ago. I just started doing my work, and there was a woman who was dying of cancer. She was end-stage cancer. I believe it was ovarian cancer, if I'm not mistaken, or uterine cancer. Anyway, she was in her late 60s, and she came up to my office with her entire family, her daughter, her son-in-law, and the grandkids, and the whole family brought her up, and they're all worried and scared. So they said, "You want us to go into the appointment with your mom?" And no, I'll be fine by myself. So she came in by herself, and we sat down. She said, "Let me get one thing straight right away. Please don't tell them I'm telling you this." She said, "But I don't have any intention of doing anything you're going to tell me to do. I'm simply not going to do it." She said, "I don't want to live any longer than I've already lived. But I've been sad my whole life because my parents basically, my life was controlled by very rigid, controlling parents who wouldn't let me choose the person I wanted to marry. My marriage was arranged. I married a husband that I didn't really relate to, didn't want to be with. I spent a whole lifetime with him, and I never left." She said, "In essence, I never really developed my personality, my likes, my dislikes. I never really understood what it meant to meet my own needs." She was very, very depressed. She said, "I want to leave." She said, "Cancer is, for all intents and purposes, my self-chosen, self-constructed trapdoor out of a miserable life." Powerful, powerful story, and I just played along with it. I said, "You know what?" I said, "I will use your story to help an awful lot of people." And I've told that story to so many different end-stage cancer patients over the years and many other patients, just to basically explain to them the importance of commitment, the importance of caring and loving for oneself. Powerful story, though.
Yeah, well, I just thought that was very powerful. And, and I also believe that, in this particular circumstance, it wasn't pleasant. But, I was very close with someone who passed in January. And, talk about the power of the mind and the soul and having people that love you, support you. She was in stage 4 for over 10 years. And finally, the doctors said, we give up telling you when you're going to die because you have defied, as far as we're concerned, every time we tell you you're going downhill, you just come back up. And what she had said to me was, I want to be alive unless I reach a point where there's too much pain. And then she's like, and then I don't want to live any longer, and I'm okay with that because I've lived a good life. And I think there's something to be said for that, because sometimes I feel like we try to keep ourselves alive at all costs, and nature just needs to take its course, in my opinion.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think also there's another message in all this, and that is everything moves from the inside out. You drop a stone over a brook or over a bridge, and everything ripples from the inside out. That's the physics of life. Nothing ripples from the outside in. And the same thing is true with virtually all subsystems. That disease begins as dis-ease. So what ends up becoming a physical, cellular, physiological problem or healthcare issue originated in emotion, thought, mind, subtleties. So a lot of people basically don't go through life being reared or being raised in a way that they come to appreciate the beauty of self, the preciousness of self. We're taught not to keep our faces in the mirror too long because we might fall in love with ourselves. Heaven forbid. I think we need to just do the opposite. We need to learn what it means to fall in love with ourselves. I think we're better lovers, we're better friends, we're better kids, we're better husbands and wives, we're better everything when we learn to fall in love with ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think we need to really have a sense of autonomous self-appreciation at the highest level. I always say there's only 2 domains in the planet, self and other. We tend to be very other-directed, and I think it plays into disease quite a bit. I think people tend not to focus on the importance and the brilliance and the beauty of self. And I think they tend to be overly focused on the world of other. I would say when a guy scores a touchdown in a football game, he points up to the sky. Why doesn't he point inside? Why does God live outside, not inside? Why do people pray outward, not pray inward? This whole process of this sort of creating self-contempt for self is really a negative process, I think, is playing largely into an awful lot of dis-ease programs that become disease.
Absolutely. I'd like you to talk briefly about since Chinese medicine is the basis for a lot of your book, about Yin Yang. I know that that's kind of a basic concept, but for instance, you refer to it as the mutual compatibility of opposites, such as in the 5 elements organ system. I always find this very fascinating, but I think others would as well who aren't as familiar as how that relates.
Well, for starters, once again, we have that starting point that everything, including us, is energy. It's comprised of energy as well as material properties. So energy and matter are interconvertible and transferable, as Einstein taught us. So starting with the standpoint of energy, we say, okay, if somebody has a disease like, let's say, heart disease, that's an inflammatory disease. That means there's too much cholesterol, too much fatty food, too much alcohol, too much spicy food, too much living, if you will, too much excessive living. So you want to basically solve the problem of excess by bringing in some deficiency. You offset one energy with the other energy. That's how you come into balance and healing. The ultimate way to heal is to bring somebody into an energetic state of balance. I say energy has 2 properties. It has yin and yang, which means it can be too much of something or not enough of something. There are 5 different degrees of that, because 1 degree is in the middle, that's balance. And you got 2 different degrees of extreme deficiency and minor deficiency, and then you got extreme excess and minor excess. So if somebody is really, really excessive, way overweight, overeating, et cetera, that's extreme yang. You want to bring them over to the yin side of life. Put them on more salads, more fibrous foods with more raw juices and things like that. So yin and yang are just applications, or they're concepts for the understanding, I should say, of extremes and deficiencies. Extremes of deficiencies and excesses. They're diseases of deficiency, like febrile osteoporosis, when somebody's bones are getting thin, they're getting broken down, they're getting weak, and I think you want to build up that strength. You want to teach them to kind of do a little bit of weightlifting, a little bit more exercising, and to eat more healthy foods and to strengthen and bring about more muscle on that bone structure. So they're diseases of deficiency, they're diseases of excess. Again, deficiency is yin. It means you want to go more in the yang direction to balance it. And heart disease and overweight diseases of yang, that's excess. You want to bring it over to the deficiency side and kind of thin it down. They're just really applications of terms that help us kind of visualize and encapsulate the idea that energy can be measured in phases of either too much or not enough of something. It can be balanced out with the opposite.
Since you've seen so many patients, have you noticed any patterns or anything of interest? Has there been a rise of a certain type of disease? And is anything that you can relate to? At some point today we've talked about feeling not good enough or those kind of feelings that affect all of this and can be the root of disease. But if you've noticed patterns or anything that you find interesting that you'd like to share.
Yeah, two of them. I'd say there's 2. Number 1, from the mental perspective, I'd say the idea of self-contempt, like we just talked about. I can't tell you how many people come in and say, I feel like such a jerk, I feel like such a dope, I can't believe I screwed that up, I feel so stupid, I feel so silly. There's this constant sort of dialoguing that reveals to me that people, I'm too fat, I can't believe how fat I am. And, most of these people are like built really well, and they're fit, and they're healthy, and they couldn't be in any better physical shape. Yeah, Mark, can you help me lose 15 or 20 more pounds? I'm thinking, where are you going to put it? Where are we going to take it from? So my theory is that there's this high sort of performance culture that we grow up in here. We've developed at such a tension-based level to be high performance and to be straight-A students, the most brilliant people in the world, the most beautiful people in the world. Everybody wants to look like Hollywood. It's crazy, and it's really breeding a tremendous amount of self-contempt. So from the mental perspective, I'd say there's a real run on that one. It's astounding how much it's hitting us. Mm-hmm. Number 2, I'd say physiologically, we now know that, we used to think in the old days that inflammation was like a tennis elbow. We now know that inflammation is a biochemical process. It's a hormonal process, not a gender-based hormone process, but an inflammatory process. And we're saying now that inflammation is responsible for 72% of all disease, 72%, including all cancer and all heart disease, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and on and on and on. So I've seen a tremendous amount of inflammation get really out of control of late. I think it's because foods that really breed inflammation, like the standard American diet, red meat, dairy products, peanuts, egg yolks, and there's too much of that being consumed, and there's too much inflammation that's the result of it. So I've had so many people I've been able to help with inflammatory conditions like heart disease and cancer and all that stuff, getting them on anti-inflammatory diets. So two things, self-contempt and inflammation, those are my choices.
I actually took the supplement that you recommended in the back of the book. I read the book, took notes, and did the work, and I was like, okay, so we're going to try this. You touched about it briefly. I talked about my friend Sybil. In the book, you talk about the Lester Levinson case, but I'd love for you to talk about the power of the mind to heal. I used to be deathly allergic to cats, and I met a guy with a cat who I ended up marrying. So, but I'd been doing the work trying to find someone like, hey, well, you want to be the best woman you can be. And then, ever since I met him, I'm not allergic to cats, which is pretty close to miracle as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that I've noticed, it's all allergy related, is I used to live in LA, no allergies, no problem. I'm now in Raleigh, North Carolina. Within a year, I went outside and thought I was going to die, and people are like, that would be called allergies. But I have started to release those, and for the first time, allergies are horrible for me in the spring and the fall. I barely had to take anything this spring. Now, I credit it, and I would love your feedback as well, is again, continuing to work on myself and my issues and making myself possible. And, people out there might not think that that's a big deal, but for me it is. I just believe in the power of the mind to it can cure anything.
I agree with you, and I think a couple of stories I tell in the book. Number one, about this guy that came to see me a number of years ago, and he said, I got this strange problem. I said, what's going on? He said, well, you know what? He said, I'm really allergic to hot peppers, and if I were to eat hot peppers, my skin rashes like severely all over my entire body. So I said, well, don't eat red peppers. He said, well, it's not just whether I eat them or not. He said, if I think about them, I can actually cause the problems, and it's really troublesome because I occasionally, inadvertently, will think about red peppers, hot peppers, and I break out in this horrible body rash from head to toe. And I said, this is kind of a hard one to believe. And I said, can you show me? He said, absolutely. So he sat in front of me completely clear, skin was perfectly fine, closed his eyes and just kind of thought about himself, imagined himself eating hot red peppers. Sure enough, in about 3 or 4 minutes, his entire body started to heat up and he got a rash all over the entire body. I was like really blown away. I was stunned. I said, all right, listen, if your mind is that good, if you're that good, then I want you to picture yourself imagining that you're in a snowbank, rolling around in a snowbank with nothing but your skivvies on. And he did that, and the rash completely cleared up in about 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. So what is that all about? That is really all about a really remarkable process in the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. It's a part of the brain there that really creates the same neurological response, whether you imagine something or, in fact, whether you really honestly do it. There's no difference whatsoever. They did studies at Harvard not too long ago, 2011, I believe it was. They had people playing these piano pieces, these beautiful piano pieces that were expert musicians, and then they had the same group of people. They wired them. They wired their brains. They scanned their brains, and they found that the certain specific part of the anterior cingulate cortex that was generating all the neurology in the brain was very, very, very active. And they brought in a bunch of piano duffers that never played the piano in their lives, people that couldn't even play chopsticks. They had them imagining that they were playing the piano. They wired them, the same exact brain scans happened, identical. So they've done a number of different studies since then that have proven over and over and over that whether you imagine something or whether you actually do it, you're activating the same neurology through the same anterior cingulate cortex in the brain. So actually we're just beginning to scratch the surface of how you can use this in what's called neuroplasticity to actually activate the left prefrontal cortex of the brain to make things happen that otherwise never would happen before through pure thought, concentration, focus, and intention. So we do have that ability with our brain. We're just beginning to scratch the surface. Brilliant stuff.
fantastic. I'm sorry, and I just want you, we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure that we touch briefly, and I love that you talked about the 5 spirit blockages. So whatever you feel moved to share about that, I'd love for you to discuss that.
Well, these are ancient Chinese exercises that have been just remarkably helpful for so many of my patients, because so many people have broken hearts and broken spirits, and they can take the vitamins and eat the right food, but you got to go to the next level, of course. That's really what holism is about. It's about the whole self. And the spirit blockages actually are exercises that sort of point out that even when we're not really aware of it, there are often blockages that can affect our physical health that come from levels of emotion. And the emotion affects the spirit, the energy that we have that we so need to support ourselves and our entire being with. But there are ways to actually perform these exercises to open them up and free them, which really happens in the mind. Mm-hmm. Almost like we were just saying a minute ago. And it's like the Chinese have known this for thousands of years, and the stuff that our scientists are just beginning to discover the Chinese have known forever. That by you thinking positive thoughts and sending them to your liver, your kidneys, your gallbladder, your lungs, they're gonna deliver. They're gonna feel that. They're gonna make a difference. Your mind has to focus positive, flowing, happy thoughts, healing thoughts, intentions to your liver, your kidney, your gallbladder, your organ systems. And you got to understand that that's a form of what's called Qigong, which is energy mastery, that the Chinese have been piecing together these remarkable exercises, these healing exercises for 3,000-4,000 years. They work. They really work. There are actually many Qigong specialists, therapists who work in major hospitals now to help people who are terminally ill. So the Western world is starting to tune in. It's for real. It's incredible stuff. And the book really teaches people how to do that for themselves. And it's pretty simple, too. It's just a matter of intention and time.
I also think gratitude is something
huge.
That, it can just change your thinking. And I would... I'm trying to think of the right. I believe it switches your energy, and it would be interesting. I don't know if they've done studies on this, doing an MRI, if you're blah or cranky or feeling sorry for yourself, whatever it is, and then when you start having gratitude, but I just believe that just changes your energy.
Which can be muscle tested, as we said earlier, Julie. So in other words, like we did on Dr. Oz, you can use words and concepts like just the word alone. Think about that. I can muscle test Julie, and Julie can say the word gratitude and get really, really, really strong. She can say the word misery, and the arm can get really, really weak. And you can just contrast these responses back and forth. It's just remarkable. It's truly telling about how you are wired together as one unit, and how responsive you are, and how radiant your ability is to communicate to yourself if you're willing to listen.
What one step could people take? You have lots of great information in the book, and I want you to tell us about your website and where to get the book after this. But if you were to say, okay, everyone, just do one thing to move towards better health, what would it be?
It'd be 2 things. Number 1 would be, if you're not eating organic, wild fish, organic produce, free-range poultry, if you just kind of postpone that because it's too expensive, do not, please, don't postpone it another minute. We're in dire situation right now as far as food. You consider the fact that if you look at the chromosomes in wheat, your grandmother's wheat had 14 chromosomes. Mm-hmm. It has 28 chromosomes now. Mm-hmm. So because of genetic modification, which is completely out of hand at this point, your body is receiving foods that it does not even recognize. You have receptors that your body has produced that are part of your eternal history that go back to your great-grandmothers, great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmothers, etc., that are not designed to recognize a 28-chromosome piece of food that was designed for 14 chromosomes. Our bodies are completely stumped. They don't know what to do with these foods, and they're causing disease and sickness. So number 1, go organic, wild, and free-range today, please. Number 2, think positive, loving thoughts of yourself. Change your whole attitude. Get rid of your self-contempt. Embrace yourself as a beautiful, beautiful being. I know it's a stretch for most people because they've been shamed out of it. You need to overcome that. It doesn't need any reason or rationale or any excuses to do so. Just dump it. Get rid of it. Embrace the positivity of self. Embrace yourself as a loving being and start to tap into your love for yourself just like you would for the greatest love of your life. You need to become the greatest love of your life. You'll do everything else better from there. You'll love everybody else better. You become a better human being, a healthier human being. Your life will turn 180.
Absolutely. When I loved myself, I found the love of my life. I agree with that many
Beautiful.
ways. So tell us your website and how they can get the book. I'm holding up a copy. I know it's available on Amazon because I reviewed it, but your website, Amazon,
Thankfully,
what else?
Pretty simple. We got one-stop shopping there. It's just Max Healing. It's one word, M-A-X, like maximum, maxhealing.com. So maxhealing.com. And the book is entitled Whole Health, and it's also available all over the place. It's available at Amazon.com, and it's still doing really, really well. At one point, we were number 78 out of 14 million books.
I'd say I'd be very excited if my book was doing that. I haven't written a book, but I'd be excited if it was. That's fantastic. We want to thank you for your time and encourage everyone to check out the book. If you are suffering from a disease and trying to change your life for better health, definitely check this out. And want to thank everyone for watching, and we'll see you here next week. Get out there and reawaken your brilliance. Bye now.
Tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, and if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals. ThatVidBlasterGuy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.